That was not bad.
And today, we're going to be taking a look at the forgotten Glock, or not really a Glock at all in this case. This is a Polymer 80 Glock 26, and it is currently one of my favorite guns to carry. Now, while you're already here, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as that is free and does help us out quite a bit. Also, go ahead and comment your favorite stubby, chubby little handgun in the comments down below. Now, full disclosure on this Polymer 80 Glock 26, this is one of my personal handguns. I've had it for quite some time. I paid full retail price for it at the time, and I have no relationship with Polymer 80 or with Glock in any way, shape, or form. Now, recently, if you've been watching the channel, I've done a lot of videos on kind of micro compact guns, the P365, the P365 XL, the Smith & Wesson CSX, and the Smith & Wesson Performance Series, the Shield Plus Performance Center. And then I went ahead and I went back to this guy, and I was very surprised at how much better this gun shot for me personally. Now, those small micro compacts are very size and weight efficient for how much ammunition they can carry, with the P365 and XL going up to 12 rounds, I believe, if you get the little extension, and same with the CSX and Shield Plus being in that 10 to 12 round standard capacity. Now, the Glock 26 design itself has a couple of advantages and disadvantages over those guns, being that this is basically a cut down full-size gun, meaning that it is the same width and profile as the standard like Glock 17. This of course has a longer slide, longer frame, and this has the shortest slide and shortest frame. However, it is still a very thick handgun, especially when comparing against the P365, CSX, and again, other slim kind of 1.5 double stack micro compacts. Now, the standard capacity on this gun is 10 rounds for the flush fit. However, I don't own any flush fit magazines for it, so anytime that I'm using it or shooting it, it is with the 12 round extension. Now, the advantage that this gun has for me, and what we'll get into, why this went right back into my carry rotation after I shot it, after shooting all of those micro compacts, is that for me personally, my hands, which aren't particularly large hands, this gun, just with the additional girth, the additional grip, shoots so much better. It's less snappy, it's less flippy than a lot of those micro compacts. Some of that probably comes down to the fact that the grip just has more surface area on it. The grip is also quite good, though we'll get into that in just a minute. So it has a little bit more girth, a little bit more area for my hands to go onto. On top of that, the slide is a little bit heavier. The gun in general is a little bit heavier than those other micro compacts. Dual stage recoil spring is probably helping out there a little bit. All of those things combined together, on top of the fact that I've shot Glocks quite a bit at this point, after I shot this, after those other guns, I was again very pleasantly surprised with how much better this gun shot for me than those other micro compacts. Now, for you personally, that might be a little bit different. If you don't need the extra grip size, if it's not something you're a fan of, if you're used to shooting micro compacts and not used to shooting Glocks at all, maybe this isn't really a fair comparison in that regard. But something that I will say is that for me personally, it was a night and day difference from those very small, snappy micro compacts to even something like a Glock 26. Now, the disadvantage of the Glock 26, of course, is going to be that it is a very thick handgun. So depending on your style of clothing, how you carry, thickness can be very important to overall comfort. For me personally, it's really not, but if you're somebody who likes to wear skinny jeans, then having a very thick handgun in your pants probably isn't going to be all that comfortable. But even for me personally, this might be slightly harder to conceal in certain circumstances, slightly less comfortable, but for me, the performance trade-off is well worth it. So let's go ahead and get into what the gun actually is. So this is, I believe, Polymer 80 calls it the PF9SC, which is the polymer frame 9mm subcompact, which is of course the Glock 26 size handgun. Now, the grip is very short. So if you, even my smaller hands, my pinky hangs off, which is why I only use the 12 round magazines. With the 12 round magazines, it's going to be a little bit taller than your other micro compacts that can get a little bit more rounds in a slightly smaller, again, harder to control and shoot well platform, but it is going to be much easier to conceal, especially for some people. Now, the grip texturing on here, on the Polymer 80s, is so much better than what you get on like a stock Glock frame. So while the angle is very similar, you do get a lot of this very good, very grippy texture on the sides that goes all the way up, which is very nice. A little bit on the back, and of course on the front as well. On top of that, the magazine well is not really a flared magazine will, but it does have a fairly nice bevel, which means even for a short gun like this, it is still very easy to hit mag changes. Now, in terms of controls, it is all standard Glock affair. So you have a slightly extended slide stop / slider release, which makes it much easier to hit, even again for my smaller hands. This model came with a extended magazine release, which I've sanded down a little bit to make it a little bit more comfortable for me personally, so it's not quite so long and extended. Occasionally, depending on how tight I'm gripping the gun, I used to be able to drop the magazine unintentionally, but after I shaved it down a little bit, I don't have that issue anymore. Now, moving forward to the trigger guard, this is the area that really messes up a lot of holster compatibility, because this is the one area that they have to change from the Glock frame for some reason. I forget the legalities of all of that, but the trigger guard shape is a little bit interesting, and that's where most of your holster compatibility issues are going to come from, and that is one of the downsides of a Polymer 80 versus just getting an off-the-shelf Glock 26. Now, moving forward from there, very nicely, you do have a standard Picatinny rail, which is very nice. That means most of your small aftermarket lights will fit on here, or will have an adapter to fit on a standard Picatinny rail, meaning that you have all of the options in the world. Now, if you have a light on your handgun, usually when you're concealed carrying or putting it in a holster, usually those holsters will index off of the light, and that will remove the issue of course, the trigger guard being a slightly awkward shape. Now, before we move on to the slide, we'll go ahead and talk about the trigger real fast. The trigger is, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you ask, a very standard Glock trigger. So you have a fairly heavy, fairly mushy take-up. You hit a well-defined wall, and then you kind of just pull through like, you know, 1/8 of an inch of mush, and then eventually you get your break at about 6.5 pounds. Fortunately, the reset is short and very forced. It pushes your finger forward, which means that you can, if you need to, shoot it very quickly, very easily. It's very natural to shoot, especially if you shot Glocks before. The Glock 26 trigger is going to be very, very natural. So again, you have a lot of take-up that's fairly heavy, and then you kind of hit a wall, it's mushy, you pull, and then you get your break at the back of the trigger. And again, that very decent reset. Now, moving into the slide itself, this is the Atmos Judah slide, I want to say. I might have that backwards again, it's been some time. But you do, of course, have your dual stage recoil spring, which is standard on the Polymer 80 Glock 26s. I believe after the Gen 3 is when that became standard off you buy, of course, a Glock 26, not a Polymer 80 subcompact. I believe you have your 3-inch barrel, and the rest of the slide is a very chunky little guy that is short, stubby, and very thick. Now, the accuracy that I'm able to get out of this handgun is quite good for a subcompact. The only issue that I have with this one personally is the sights are fairly diminutive. Fortunately, again, the Glock 26 takes standard Glock sights, so whatever aftermarket sights you want to throw in there, you definitely can. I'm running currently a set of very low profile blacked out sights, so it's just black on black. For me personally, it works really well out to about 25 yards, and then after 50, 60 yards or so, they really obscure most of the target, and they're not all that good for precision shooting, though, again, for its intended use case scenario of being kind of a very small, not a micro compact, but a compact gun, they work well enough, though. In the future, I might upgrade to a set of a little bit nicer sights to make it a little bit easier for me. Now, very nice on this slide, you do have very aggressive forward and rear serration, so if you want to do your uber cool press checks, or of course your malfunction clearing drills or whatnot, it's very easy to do on this slide. Now, talking about malfunctions and issues in terms of reliability, Polymer 80s can be a bit of a mixed bag, whether you're buying a complete one or doing one yourself. We won't really get into that here, of course. But with this specific one, with mine, I did have a little bit of a break-in period throughout the first couple hundred rounds. I had a few bobbles here and there in terms of extraction and feeding. However, at this point, this gun has over 1,000 rounds on it. And the last 700 or 800 or so have been completely trouble-free. It's been perfectly reliable, which is why I am very comfortable carrying. Now, there was actually a very long stretch of time where I didn't carry this gun at all or shoot it really. It kind of just stayed in the safe and never moved. I got access to a lot of smaller micro carry guns that were a little bit easier to carry, and there were also times where I was perfectly happy just carrying my kitted out Glock 17 and then a micro compact. I carried it because it was super easy, and then I shot all of them. And then I tried out the Glock 26 again just for the heck of it. And then it really shot so much better for me than those other micro compacts that I went right back to carrying it again, just like I was like a year ago. Now, at the end of the day, is the Glock 26 the perfect carry handgun? Well, not really. It is definitely a bit of an older design, and it is really overlooked by a lot of people. However, for me personally, again, it shoots a lot better for me personally than a lot of those other micro compacts. So if I had to choose to carry one, well, I'd carry a smaller gun, but they just don't shoot as well. And since this does not necessarily the best of both worlds, but because it does perform so well while still being very easy to conceal, again, depending on who you are, for me personally, the added performance that I get out of the Glock 26 versus the standard thinner, slimmer, lighter micro compact is well worth the slight trade-off in terms of concealability and comfort while carrying. So, with all that out of the way, guys, I'm a big fan of the Glock 26, or in this case, of course, the Polymer 80 Glock 26, but let me know what you guys think of it in the comments down below. So, with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.